More of the Zach Gelb Show on Fox Sports 920 The Jersey.
All right, welcome back in. 5:17 on this Monday. Zach Gelb Show, Fox Sports 920 The Jersey. The highly anticipated preseason game number 2 will be played in Philadelphia on Thursday up against the Buffalo Bills. And there are a lot of former Eagles or people with Eagles ties on the Buffalo Bills. The new head coach in Buffalo and Sean McDermott. You have Shady McCoy. And also Jordan Matthews, who did get hurt, and he has a chip fracture in the sternum, so he's week to week. But the Eagles did make a big trade with the Bills on Friday as they sent Jordan Matthews, who was a very productive wide receiver here in Philadelphia, in a third-round pick, and in return got a corner, which the Eagles did need in Ronald Darby. So let's get some more perspective on this trade and welcome in someone that was dominant for the Buffalo Bills from 1986 to 1993, was actually drafted by the Philadelphia Eagles, and now does a tremendous job as a Bills color analyst, and that's the great Mark Kelso, who's kind enough to hop on board with us right now. Mark, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much, and how are you?
I'm doing well, guys. Hey, how is everything up in that neck of the woods? I'm down in North Carolina at the moment, so.
Well, today everything's going great, but we were at the NovaCare Complex, and a lot of guys, they were upset. And you know how this business is. You got to be professional, but there is personal relationships, and a lot of guys, they were very close to Jordan Matthews since he was a very good teammate here in Philly.
Well, yeah, I think you could equally say that same thing in Buffalo, and I was just reading some reports out of Buffalo. Had a couple skirmishes in practice today, and I'm sure some of that's frustration that spills over when you take two guys that are quality starters for your club, and you know they're kind of jettisoned off to other teams, and you got some quality people in return, but it's hard to. It takes a while to build those relationships and establish them, and certainly they don't just end when a player is moved to another club, and I'm sure that there was a lot of affection with his teammates for Sammy Watkins and Ronald Darby. Both guys were significant contributors to the Bills and outstanding starters, and one day they're there, one day they're not, and it's really hard. I mean, training camp is an important component of preparing for the upcoming season, but it's very difficult to develop those close relationships when you have 90 guys on the field and you're not sure which 90 you're going to be, remaining when the end of training camp occurs. But I can imagine the same can be said in Philadelphia. But we're certainly glad to have Jordan Matthews, and a guy who statistically has better numbers than Sammy Watkins had. Maybe not the deep threat that Sammy was, but catches the ball in tight spaces and can escape, in those short areas. What does he have, about like 11 yards per catch, I think, in his NFL career. So excited to see what he's going to be able to do with that Buffalo receiving core.
The trade that the Bills made, the two trades, it caught some people by surprise. And I understand when you get a new regime, there are going to be changes. But Watkins is a very good football player. They get back Gaines in a second. And then you give up Darby, who's a young cornerback who had a really good 2015, for Matthews in a third. From a Bills perspective, give us a little bit more insight on what they were thinking to pull the trigger on this deal.
Yeah, and I was caught a little bit by surprise as well. I mean, things seemed to go well against the Vikings on Thursday night, and you think they made some steps forward here in the OTAs and the beginning of preseason, and then both those trades come down. And so I think, when you step back and look at it, I think there's a couple things. Number one is Sammy has had some injuries. I hope that he's healthy, and I hope his career continues because he's a dynamic playmaker. He really is when he's healthy. But there is some concern about his long-term health. There's no question about that. And they didn't pick up his contract this year. They didn't pick up his fourth-year option. And I think there was probably some I don't know if there's some disagreement, but certainly some healthy discussion in the building, I'm sure, about whether or not they would want to pick up, sign him as a free agent next year when he becomes a free agent, or if they were going to try to tag him if, in fact, he had a really good year, particularly with his injury history. I know they gave up a lot to get him in the first place, and maybe they felt like they had paid enough in that situation. I don't know, but certainly he's a dynamic player. Had a lot of guys on the Bills squad that counted on him and had developed some pretty close relationships. So that'll be a difficult loss to absorb here in the short term. Ronald Darby is a guy who had a terrific 2015 in his rookie season and played. I think he played equally well last year. Made a couple of mistakes, but those guys. I mean, there was some fluctuation in the Bills secondary last year, and they weren't on the same page the whole time. Aaron Williams went out, of course, and Corey Graham you have in Philadelphia, who who turned himself into a really good safety, but that wasn't his natural position. And last year was, he was at the starting role last year in Buffalo and trying to kind of take charge of that group and did a nice job. But again, it was something he was just learning and growing into the position at that particular time. So I think that's the situation with Ronald Darby, but an outstanding cover guy, a guy who's a good teammate, a guy who I think has tremendous upside. And if it's a schematic situation, which I think that was from the Bills' perspective, because they're going to play a lot more zone coverage, I would think, than man this year under Coach Frazier and with the things that Coach McDermott wants to do, that he may be a really good fit for you guys in Philadelphia.
Can Darby be that consistent number one? What does he need to improve on to consistently be that number one cornerback that will be expected out of him here in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I mean, he's not the biggest guy, so I mean, he's got to work at the line of scrimmage. He just has to get his hands on guys and stop their momentum. He's got great acceleration. He's going to be able to have some makeup speed. He probably needs to tackle just a little bit better and just to make sure he's consistent with that. And I think he can compete for balls. There's no question about that. And I think he can be a consistent number one. And he just needs to continue to grow. This league, sometimes you bring guys into it and you think, you want them to play at a level when they first get drafted, and there's still a lot of skill development that needs to occur. And as he continues to grow and improve, I think he'd be an outstanding cover guy for you guys, certainly. But there's all kinds of little things as a defensive back. You've got to be, when you're at the line of scrimmage, and you've got to have a set plan of what you're going to do when that receiver begins to attack you. Because if you spread your feet and all your techniques are just not perfect, you're going to create an opportunity for the receiver to develop some separation out of the break or create a leverage situation where they're going to be in a more advantageous position and they're going to win the down in that situation. So I think once he gets used to those things and you're playing against that top talent week in and week out, but I see nothing but upside for Ronald Darby.
Talking to Mark Kelso right now from the Bills Radio Network, also played with the Bills from 1986 to 1993 on the Zach Gelb Show. The trade in Buffalo, and we talk about those personal relationships, and we all know that Shady McCoy is never afraid to speak his mind, but he was talking about how he could relate to Sammy Watkins being hurt after a trade for a guy he's probably better than, is what Shady had to say. And he also said, if you compare the two, it's obvious you can agree who's better. How about the comments from Shady McCoy?
I think that's just his disappointment that's being expressed because it was a teammate and it was a guy he was counting on and a guy that was a prominent part of the Bills' offense if they're going to have a successful campaign in 2017, or was a prominent part. I'm a big guy, a big fan of the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, and unfortunately they took some key parts out. But if they can come together and Jordan Matthews has played quality football for Philadelphia, certainly, and if he can come in and do the things he did in Philadelphia, then the whole will continue to improve and continue to get better. But I just think that's expressing frustration over having a really good teammate, a guy that you've built a personal relationship with, a guy that you believe is going to be a big part of your team, and then the next day somebody else makes a decision. Certainly, if they're asking LaShawn McCoy, he's not doing that, and yes, he found himself in that same position, and things have gone pretty well for him, certainly since he's been in Buffalo and continues to play at an extremely high level. So, that's just evidence of the fact that those guys built a really strong bond in the couple years that they've been there together, and I don't think anything more than that. And I think that LaShawn, whatever his relationship was with Jordan Matthews, because they were together in Philly, right? So
yeah, for 1
whatever
year.
his relation. Yeah, so whatever his relationship, I suspect he'll welcome him with open arms, and he's disappointed that Sammy's not there. But I would think that he would welcome Jordan and expect him to come in and fill a big role that the void that was created by Sammy's departure.
How do you think Sean McDermott will be as a head coach, Mark?
I like him, what he's done so far. I like the fact that he has a plan, it seems like. He seems very judicious in the implementation of that plan. I think a couple things. I don't know him really well. I've had a number of conversations with him. We have a little bit of a William Mary connection, and he played at William Mary as well and had a really outstanding career there, and then coached there 1 year under under Coach Laycock, who's still the head coach at William Mary before he got his opportunity in Philadelphia. So, I mean, I haven't had any lengthy conversations with Coach McDermott, but I've spent a little bit of time with him, and again, like the things he's trying to do, like the fact that he hired Leslie Frazier for one, some other, I think there's another gentleman on the staff, one of the other coaches that has head coaching experience, but Coach Frazier I really like. I like his demeanor. I like the way he handles the defensive schematics and the way he handles players, the way he talks to the press. And you can see there aren't too many Bills coaches that talk to the press. Coach McDermott does. Brandon Beane has had some opportunities to address the press, and I think Leslie Frazier has. So, he has great confidence in that. And the fact that Coach Frazier was a head coach previously in this league, and certainly Coach McDermott will find himself in situations where Coach Frazier can be a great sounding board and advisory to him in those situations. So I like those things about him. I like that he has a process. I like that he seems like he's not going to try to call defenses this year. He's going to turn that over, and I think eventually he'll step back. He's trying to handle everything right now and trying to put his finger on everything so that they don't let anything kind of leave any stone unturned in regards to their preparation phase. And I think as he begins to trust people and trust all those guys on his staff, he'll start to turn those things over to staff members, and those things can go pretty smoothly. But I like what I've seen so far. The draft went well. It seems like they're building some camaraderie, but it's difficult to do until you really settle on your 53. But I mean, I'd give him positive marks so far, and hope for the future here. I mean, I'm a diehard Buffalo guy, so I want him to be successful.
Duff's or Anchor Bar?
Truth be told, the Bar Bill in East Aurora, New York,
Ooh.
has the best wings in Buffalo.
Okay. I've only been to Duff's and Anchor Bar, and I'm more of a Duff's guy, but I'll have to check that out next time I go to Buffalo.
Yeah, if we gotta choose between Duff's and Anchor Bar, I mean, you can't go wrong with either of those places. But I would probably lean to Duff's. Yeah, I would probably lean to Duff's, I guess. But I don't go to Duff's because I go to the Bar Bill. So any pizza place in Buffalo has good wings, no doubt about it.
You can't go wrong for wings up in Buffalo. Hey, I have to check in on my Temple guys, Deion Dawkins and Rod Streeter. What have you seen out of them so far?
Yeah, I mean, Streeter has been really impressive at the receiver position, and I think he's a guy that seems like, it's hard to say a lock for a roster spot, but I would say that, I would say he's going to be here, and he will, as it seems right now, he may become a very healthy component of the Bills receiving corps, and has done some really good things, and I think they like his veteran leadership. And so I think they really feel like that he has an opportunity to make a big impact on this Bills offensive unit here. And then Dawkins has been, they've kind of been substituting two guys at a time. So, I mean, the offensive line, in my opinion, is the offensive line and the secondary are the two defensive or the two unit components of a football team that I think need the most synergy to kind of play as an entire unit. And it takes a little while for them to develop that synergy. So when you start moving pieces on the offensive line or in the defensive secondary, it takes a little bit time for those components to gel. But so Dawkins has been coming in, so they'll play with Miller and Mills, and then they'll substitute. I don't know if they're putting in Ryan Groy and Dawkins, but they're putting those guys in with as a unit so that they're used to playing with that particular person. I mean, but he's been really impressive in training camp. I haven't seen a lot of training camp because I do work out of town and then and back and forth all the time. So I haven't seen a lot, but I've been reading a lot about him, and certainly they feel very favorably about him and feel like he has a great upside. So I don't know. He's gotten some starting reps. I don't know that he'd start the season as a starter because I really like what John Miller can do, and it's hard to argue with the success the Bills have had the last couple of years with LaShawn running and those guys blocking. So let's just see kind of how things unfold. But I know Jordan Mills is a guy they thought he might step in for, and Jordan Mills has had a pretty healthy camp as well, and just going to have to see how the next few weeks unfold. But certainly both of those guys have represented Temple very well here in camp so far.
On the way out with Mark Kelso, who joins us right now. I want to get a little into the player safety conversation. We all saw that new CTE study, and I know this is something that you talk a lot about, going back to your playing days, wearing the extra padding in the helmet. First off, take me through the decision back when you were a player to go with the bigger helmet.
Well, it's completely a safety factor, and then you have a wife that's involved too, and she's saying, "I don't want you to play if you're going to continue to get concussions." So we had an opportunity to try a product that was kind of in the inception phase. I mean, it was a product that was developed by a person out of Erie, Pennsylvania, by the name of Bert Strauss, and he had done it actually for a hockey player, and had a relationship with Eddie Abramowski, who was our head trainer at the time, and said, "Hey, I think I have this product that can help Mark." There had been extensive studies conducted at Penn State University, Temple University. I mean, there were a lot of studies that were conducted there as well, Wayne State University. So it's not like I just put this thing on my head and because some guy said it might work. I mean, there was extensive research and studies that were done to corroborate its effectiveness, and it was extremely effective for me. I mean, it enabled me to play 5 years. I played 5 years with that extra padding, and it was all about increasing the time of the hit so that you can decrease the force, because the longer it takes for the force to get to your head, then the more protected your head's going to be. And I found very favorable results with that. And I think the game can be played safely and successfully at the same time. And that product is still available. I work with another company in out of Atlanta that sells a product called the Guardian Cap, which is more of a practice cap, but same type of technology that a softer outer shell, which then causes the force to take a longer period of time to get to your brain, thereby reducing the force and thereby creating a better protective situation. So I'm all about head protection and playing the game safely. I believe we can play the game safely and successfully at the same time. I also believe that there are tremendous qualities that young men particularly, and young women when they play, young girls at the youth level as well, that there's just tremendous character development that young men and women can attain by virtue of their participation in a lot of team sports, but my experiences with football. So I would say that there's a lot of opportunity there, and a lot of the person that I am today is because of high school coaches pouring into me and investing in me, develop a relationship with me, and teaching me about integrity and valor and honor and humility and service and all those things that I think you learn in those situations. So I want to see the game thrive and survive, and I want to see it be done safely. They've made some really good steps in the right direction with the heads-up football program and teaching guys to tackle with their shoulders as opposed to using their heads, and the roll tackling situation. Those things I think are very good, limiting practice times and limiting the hitting in practice. You can practice at game speed, but you don't have to take a guy to the ground to have an effective practice, but it takes some training to do those things. And if you can do those things, I think we can play the game safely and successfully, and I think it's I like to see that. And I'd like to see the game continue to thrive. Certainly those reports about the CTE and players that experience those things is very disheartening and difficult for the families that have to experience those things. But I think there's been steps in the right direction. So hopefully we can continue to gain ground and just have a game that's really safe. Even though you'll never eliminate it completely, it'd be a really safe game to play, certainly. So is that enough? I'm kind of rambling now.
Well, with what you just said, as we're wrapping up with Mark Kelso, let's say that you have a parent that is concerned about their kid wanting to play football. Let's say the kid wants to play football. The parent is concerned with the information that you know and being someone that have lived through a game that is dangerous. What would you say to that parent?
Yeah, I would say that the game can be played safely and successfully at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. That's the first thing. And the character traits that young man or young lady are going to develop by virtue of their participation will far outweigh the risks that they would incur by playing the game. Now, that being said, the game has to be taught, the skills have to be taught, the game has to be coached, the practice regimens have to be legislated in a way that is going to create the safest environment for that athlete, that student athlete, to participate in the game. And if that situation occurs, it doesn't completely remove the threat of an injury, certainly, but I think the benefits far outweigh the risks in those situations. And I harken back. I mean, I'm a quote guy sometimes too, and I would harken back to Dwight Eisenhower when they said, "Why do you think Americans won World War II?" And he said, "High school football. There are more players that served in leadership capacity in the Americans' armed forces that played high school football than any other sport." And some of that's because there's a lot of players on a football team as opposed to other teams, but a lot of that's because you learn a lot of leadership skills and leadership traits and a lot of sacrifice and perseverance that it's difficult to learn with other sports because they're not quite as demanding in certain situations as a football situation might be. So, I would convince them. I had my own kids that played. I had one that played in college, one played baseball in college. So I did let my own kids play, and sometimes I had to argue with Mom to do that, but I think that she would agree too that there's just so many positives that you can attain by virtue of your participation that it outweighs the risks as long as you mitigate them as best you can.
Well, Mark, we appreciate the time as always, and make sure you say hello to Deion Dawkins when you see him next, a former college classmate of mine, so we appreciate the insight today.
Well, hey, I'll tell him you said hello. I have not had the pleasure of meeting him yet, but when I do, I will be sure to say hello.
Good guy. You'll like him. Thanks so much, Mark. We appreciate it.
Great. Have a good day, guys.